Keep your mouth shut, you filthy thief, Officer Vance Whitaker snarled, his rough hands forcing tape across Zaria Kingston's lips as she stood pinned against the sleek glass doors of LuminaryLabs. The morning sun glared down on Silicon Valley, illuminating the humiliation of a brilliant woman, her elegant bun of sleek black hair disheveled, her dignity under siege. This wasn't just an arrest. It was a deliberate act of contempt, a moment dripping with injustice that would spark a firestorm. In mere minutes, this scene of brutality would unravel into a breathtaking reversal, exposing truths that would shake the foundations of power. A single encounter will redefine justice, leaving no one untouched. If this story moves you, hit that subscribe button and share where you're watching from, be it New York, London, or beyond, day or night. Stay tuned. The truth will captivate you. The glass tower of LuminaryLabs pierced the Silicon Valley skyline like a beacon of ambition, its sleek lines reflecting the dawn's first light. Inside, the air thrummed with innovation. Screens flickered with code, engineers whispered about algorithms, and the hum of progress was almost tangible. At the heart of this empire stood Zaria Kingston, a 29-year-old prodigy whose name was synonymous with brilliance. Her long, glossy black hair, swept into an elegant low bun, framed a face that radiated both grace and steel. Zaria was no ordinary CEO. She was the only black woman leading a tech giant in the valley, a trailblazer who had shattered every glass ceiling with the precision of a surgeon and the ferocity of a lioness. Zaria's journey to the top was the stuff of legend. A Yale law graduate, she had graduated at the top of her class, her legal briefs so sharp they were studied in classrooms years later. She could have thrived as a lawyer, dismantling opponents in courtrooms with her razor wit, but the call of innovation lured her to Silicon Valley. At 25, she founded LuminaryLabs, a company that revolutionized AI-driven cybersecurity, turning her into a billionaire and a Forbes cover star by 28. Her office, perched on the 40th floor, was a sanctuary of power, mahogany bookshelves lined with legal tomes and tech journals, a panoramic view of the valley, and a desk engraved with her mantra, "Truth is the ultimate code." Zaria was not just a leader, she was a force, her beauty matched only by her intellect, her presence commanding every room she entered. But beneath the gleaming surface of LuminaryLabs, a shadow loomed. For weeks, the company had been plagued by mysterious intrusions. Unidentified individuals, some posing as employees, had slipped into restricted areas, their motives unclear but their intent unmistakably sinister. Whispers of industrial espionage swirled, competitors desperate to steal Luminary Labs' proprietary algorithms, which could secure or cripple entire industries. Zaria's board, a mix of seasoned tech moguls and nervous investors, demanded action. Against her instincts, Zaria agreed to hire a private security detail, supplemented by a team of local police officers to patrol the premises. She wanted cutting-edge tech to solve the problem, but the board insisted on boots on the ground. "We need visible deterrence," they argued. Zaria relented, though her gut told her this was a mistake. The mistake became apparent the moment Sergeant Vance Whitaker and his team arrived. Vance, a broad-shouldered man with a perpetual smirk, strode into LuminaryLabs like he owned it. His pale blue eyes scanned the open-plan office with disdain, lingering on the diverse staff, engineers from Mumbai, coders from Lagos, designers from Seoul. Behind him trailed officers Brock Callahan and Lyle Dutton, their uniforms crisp but their attitudes slovenly. The trio exuded arrogance, their badges less a symbol of duty than a license to intimidate. Zaria had done her homework on them. Vance, in particular, was a problem. For years, he'd skated through allegations of misconduct, extorting bribes from local businesses, roughing up suspects, always targeting those who looked like they couldn't fight back. Complaints piled up, but somehow they were always unsubstantiated. Connections in high places, Zaria suspected, kept his record clean. Her first encounter with Vance set the tone. She'd been reviewing a new AI protocol in the lab when Malik Jordan, a brilliant young programmer, hurried toward her. His face was taut with frustration. "Ms. Kingston," he said, voice low, "those cops just stopped me at the entrance. Said my laptop looked suspicious. Took my ID and made me wait 20 minutes while they verified it. Zaria's eyes narrowed, her fingers pausing on her tablet. Malik was a rising star, his code integral to their latest project. Yet to Vance, he was just another black man to harass. She straightened, her tailored blazer accentuating her commanding presence, and marched to the lobby. There, Vance lounged against a reception desk, his boots scuffing the polished marble. "Problem, ma'am?" he drawled, his tone dripping with condescension. Zaria's voice was ice. "Officer Whitaker, your job is to secure this building, not to profile my employees. Malik Jordan is a senior developer. His ID is valid, and his laptop contains proprietary data. Do your job properly, or I'll have you replaced." Vance's smirk widened, but his eyes flickered with something dangerous. "People like you should know their place," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. Brock and Lyle snickered behind him, their hands resting on their holsters. Zaria didn't flinch. She'd faced worse. Boardroom skeptics, rival CEOs, even death threats when LuminaryLabs disrupted the market. But Vance's words stung, not because they surprised her, but because they confirmed her fears. These officers weren't here to protect. They were predators in uniform, emboldened by a system that shielded them. She noted every detail, their smug expressions, the way they dismissed her authority, the casual cruelty in their laughter. Zaria had spent her life dismantling barriers, and she wasn't about to let these men tarnish her empire. Back in her office, she pulled up Vance's file on her secure server. The complaints were damning. A restaurant owner coerced into paying protection fees, a teenager detained for looking suspicious near a tech campus, a black doctor handcuffed outside his own home. Each case dismissed, buried under bureaucratic red tape. Zaria's legal mind clicked into gear. She'd hired a private investigator weeks ago, suspecting the intrusions might be an inside job. Now she wondered if Vance and his crew were complicit, perhaps taking bribes to look the other way. Her fingers hovered over her phone, tempted to call the chief of police, but she stopped. She needed evidence. Irrefutable, airtight proof. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across her office, Zaria stood at her window, gazing at the valley's sprawling tech empire. LuminaryLabs was her creation, a testament to her vision, but it was under siege, not just from faceless intruders, but from men like Vance, who saw her skin before her power. Her reflection in the glass was resolute, her dark eyes blazing with determination. She adjusted her bun, the sleek strands a quiet rebellion against the chaos below. This was her domain, and she would protect it. Little did Vance know he'd just crossed the wrong woman, a woman whose intellect was her weapon, whose resolve was her shield, and whose justice would soon rewrite his world. The morning air in LuminaryLabs' lobby was crisp, scented with coffee and ambition, but a sour undercurrent of hostility tainted the atmosphere. Sergeant Vance Whitaker leaned against a marble pillar, his boots scuffing the pristine floor, his smirk as sharp as a blade. His pale eyes roamed the bustling tech hub with predatory disdain, locking onto anyone who didn't fit his narrow definition of belonging. Beside him, officers Brock Callahan and Lyle Dutton mirrored his arrogance, their laughter cutting through the hum of keyboards like a discordant note. These men, clad in the authority of their badges, weren't here to protect LuminaryLabs. They were here to dominate it. Their presence was a storm cloud over Zaria Kingston's empire, and today that storm would break. Malik Jordan, a 26-year-old prodigy with a knack for cracking complex code, hurried through the glass doors, his laptop bag slung over one shoulder. His dreadlocks were neatly tied back, his LuminaryLabs badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Malik was no stranger to scrutiny. He'd grown up in a world that judged him before he spoke, but he wasn't prepared for the ambush awaiting him. Vance stepped into his path, blocking the entrance like a gatekeeper from hell. "Where are you going with that, kid?" he sneered, jabbing a finger at Malik's laptop. "Looks like stolen tech to me." Brock and Lyle flanked him, their hands resting on their holsters, their grins dripping with malice. Malik froze, his heart pounding, but his voice steady. "This is my work laptop. I'm a senior developer here. My IDs are in my bag." He reached for it, but Brock grabbed his wrist, twisting it just enough to sting. "Don't get smart, boy," Brock hissed, his breath reeking of cheap coffee. We'll check it ourselves. Lyle snatched the bag, unzipping it with deliberate roughness, tossing Malik's belongings onto the floor. A notebook, a protein bar, a photo of his daughter. Employees passing by slowed, their whispers a soft chorus of unease, but none dared intervene. Vance's reputation preceded him. A man who'd extorted shopkeepers, planted evidence on teenagers, and walked away unscathed, his connections a shield against accountability. Zaria Kingston, alerted by a frantic text from her assistant, descended from her 40th floor office like a queen entering a battlefield. Her tailored navy suit hugged her frame, her long black hair swept into a low bun that radiated elegance and control. At 29, she carried the weight of 1,000 victories, her Yale law degree a silent weapon in her arsenal. She stepped into the lobby, her heels clicking with purpose, and the air shifted. Employees straightened, their eyes flickering with hope. Vance, oblivious to her presence, continued his tirade. "You people always have an excuse," he spat at Malik, holding up the laptop like a trophy. "Think you can sneak in here and steal secrets? Not on my watch." "Officer Whitaker!" Zaria's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel, cool and precise. Vance turned, his smirk faltering for a split second before returning, thicker with defiance. "And who are you, lady?" he drawled, his tone laced with condescension. Zaria's dark eyes locked onto his, unyielding. "I'm the person who runs this company. That man is Malik Jordan, a senior developer whose work is worth more than your entire career. Return his property, now." Her words were a command, not a request, each syllable carrying the weight of her authority. Brock and Lyle exchanged glances, their laughter replaced by unease. But Vance didn't budge. He stepped closer to Zaria, towering over her, his breath hot with arrogance. "People like you should know their place," he said, his voice low and venomous. "This is my turf now. You don't tell me how to do my job." The lobby fell silent, the air thick with the audacity of his words. Employees froze, their phones discreetly recording, sensing a moment that would echo beyond these walls. Zaria's face remained a mask of composure, but her mind was a storm of calculations. She'd seen men like Vance before, bullies cloaked in authority, thriving on fear, protected by a system that turned a blind eye to their crimes. She stepped back, her gaze never leaving Vance's. "You're here to secure this building, not to harass my staff," she said, her voice steady as steel. "Malik's ID is in his bag. Verify it, or I'll have you escorted out." Vance's eyes narrowed, a flicker of rage betraying his calm facade. He tossed Malik's laptop to Lyle, who fumbled it, the device clattering to the floor. "Oops," Lyle said, smirking. Malik's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his dignity a quiet rebellion against their cruelty. Zaria noted every detail, the scuff on Malik's laptop, the smugness in Vance's posture, the way Brock's fingers twitched near his taser. She was building a case, her legal mind cataloging evidence for a reckoning she knew was coming. As Malik retrieved his belongings, his hands trembling with suppressed anger, Zaria placed a hand on his shoulder. "Go back to work," she said softly. "I've got this." Malik nodded, his trust in her absolute. Zaria turned to Vance, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You've made a mistake today, officer. A very costly one." Vance laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the lobby, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. He didn't know it yet, but he just ignited a fire that would consume his carefully constructed world. Zaria returned to her office, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. She opened her laptop, pulling up the private investigator's report on Vance and his crew. The file was thick with damning evidence, bank records hinting at bribes, dismissed complaints from minority communities, a pattern of abuse stretching back a decade. These men weren't just rogue cops. They were a cancer in the system, and Zaria was the surgeon ready to cut them out. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers brushing the edge of her desk, where her mantra was carved. Truth is the ultimate code. The storm was gathering, and Zaria Kingston was its eye. Calm, focused, and ready to unleash a reckoning that would shake Silicon Valley to its core. The late morning sun poured through the towering glass facade of LuminaryLabs, casting sharp shadows across the marble lobby. Zaria Kingston stepped out of her sleek black sedan, her simple charcoal blazer and slacks a departure from her usual tailored elegance. Her long black hair, swept into a low bun, gleamed like obsidian, a quiet nod to her unyielding poise. She carried a leather tote, heavy with cash for a charity gala she'd committed to sponsoring. Today she was late, a rare occurrence thanks to an impromptu meeting with a venture capitalist across town. As she approached the entrance, her heels clicked with purpose, her mind already racing through the day's agenda. But the air shifted as she neared the glass doors, a chill of malice cutting through the Silicon Valley warmth. Sergeant Vance Whitaker stood like a sentinel, his broad frame blocking the entrance, his pale eyes glinting with contempt. Officers Brock Callahan and Lyle Dutton lounged nearby, their smirks as sharp as knives. They didn't recognize Zaria. Why would they? To them, she was just another black woman, a problem to be controlled. "Hey, you!" Vance barked, his voice a whip crack that halted Zaria mid-step. "Where do you think you're going with that bag?" He gestured to her tote, his tone laced with accusation. Zaria's brow arched, but her voice remained calm, a velvet glove over a steel fist. "I work here," she said, reaching for her ID. "This is my building." Vance laughed, a guttural sound that echoed in the lobby. "Your building? Nice try, sweetheart." He stepped closer, invading her space, his breath sour with arrogance. "Let's see what you're hiding." Before Zaria could respond, Brock grabbed her tote, ripping it open with a sneer. Envelopes of cash, neatly banded for the gala, spilled onto the floor, along with contracts and a tablet marked with LuminaryLabs logo. "Well, well," Brock said, holding up a stack of bills. "Looks like we've got a hustler here. Stealing from the tech nerds, huh?" Lyle snickered, kicking a contract aside as if it were trash. Zaria's heart pounded, not from fear but from a fury she kept tightly leashed. "Those are donations for a charity event," she said, her voice steady despite the outrage burning in her chest. "Check my ID. I'm Zaria Kingston, CEO of this company." Vance's eyes narrowed, his smirk twisting into something darker. "CEO? You?" He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "People like you don't run places like this." The words dripped with venom, a reminder of the world's oldest prejudice. Employees in the lobby froze, their phones discreetly raised, capturing the scene as Zaria stood tall, her dignity a fortress against their assault. Brock produced a roll of duct tape, tearing off a strip with a sickening rip. "Let's shut this one up," he said, his voice gleeful. Before Zaria could protest, he slapped the tape across her mouth, the adhesive biting into her skin. Vance twisted her arms behind her back, snapping handcuffs onto her wrists with a metallic click. "Filthy thief," he hissed, shoving her against the glass door. The impact rattled her bones, but Zaria's eyes blazed with defiance, her silence more powerful than any scream. Her tote lay gutted on the floor, papers fluttering like wounded birds, as Lyle rifled through the cash, muttering, "This'll be a nice bonus." The lobby was a tableau of shock and fear. A junior engineer, trembling, stepped forward, but Lyle's glare stopped her cold. "Mind your business, or you're next," he snapped. Zaria's mind raced, her legal training kicking in. She memorized every detail, Vance's badge number, Brock's cruel grin, the timestamp on the lobby clock. 10:45 a.m. She knew the cameras overhead were rolling, capturing every second of this outrage. These men, who'd extorted bribes and terrorized communities for years, thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. Zaria's muffled protests were ignored as Vance dragged her toward a patrol car parked outside. "You people always have a story," he said, his voice thick with scorn. "Save it for the station." Her bun loosened slightly, strands of black hair falling across her face, but her eyes remained locked on Vance, a promise of retribution burning within them. She wasn't just a victim. She was a strategist, a woman who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd faced down boardrooms and bigots alike. This was not her end. It was their undoing. As the car door slammed shut, Zaria's resolve hardened. She'd spent her life turning obstacles into stepping stones, and this moment would be no different. Vance and his cronies had no idea who they just crossed. A woman whose intellect was a weapon, whose power was absolute and whose justice would be relentless. The glass tower of LuminaryLabs stood behind her, a monument to her strength, and soon it would bear witness to a reckoning that would shatter their world. The patrol car reeked of stale coffee and arrogance as it sped through Silicon Valley's pristine streets, its sirens slicing through the late morning calm. Zaria Kingston sat in the back seat, her wrists chafed by cold handcuffs, the duct tape across her mouth a humiliating muzzle. Her sleek black hair, once neatly swept into a low bun, now clung to her face in disheveled strands, a stark contrast to the poised CEO who'd built LuminaryLabs into a tech titan. The cash-filled tote, her contracts and her tablet lay strewn in the front seat, pawed through by Officer Brock Callahan, who chuckled as he pocketed a few bills. Sergeant Vance Whitaker, behind the wheel, cast a smug glance at her through the rearview mirror. "You're in deep now, sweetheart," he sneered. "Nobody's buying your CEO story." Officer Lyle Dutton, slouched beside him, laughed, his voice a grating echo of complicity. Zaria's heart thundered, not with fear, but with a molten fury she kept tightly reined. Her Yale-trained legal mind cataloged every detail: the timestamp on the dashboard clock, 11:02 a.m., the license plate of the patrol car, the way Vance's badge glinted with misplaced pride. She was no stranger to adversity, having clawed her way to the top of a world that often saw her skin before her brilliance. But this was a violation so brazen it felt like a declaration of war. She sat straight, her dark eyes burning through the tape, a silent vow that these men would pay for their hubris. The car lurched into the parking lot of the San Jose police station, a squat concrete fortress that reeked of bureaucracy and broken promises. Inside, the station buzzed with chaos, phones ringing, officers barking orders, a drunk muttering in a holding cell. Vance shoved Zaria through the double doors, her cuffed hands making her stumble. The tape muffled her protests, but her eyes spoke volumes, searing into every officer who dared meet her gaze. Brock dumped her tote onto a processing desk, scattering envelopes of cash and LuminaryLabs documents. "Look at this haul," he said, grinning at a booking officer. "Caught her trying to sneak into a tech firm with stolen goods." The officer, a weary man with graying hair, barely glanced up, scribbling her as Jane Doe on a form. Zaria's ID, tucked in her tote's inner pocket, went ignored, just as she'd predicted. These men weren't interested in truth. They thrived on control. Vance leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. "People like you always think you're special," he whispered. "But you're just another name on a rap sheet now." He ripped the tape from her mouth, the sting sharp but fleeting. Zaria didn't flinch, her voice steady as granite. "You've made a mistake, Officer Whitaker. Check my ID." Vance laughed, tossing her wallet to Lyle, who flipped through it carelessly. "Nice try," Lyle said, pocketing her driver's license. "We'll get to that later." They pushed her toward a holding cell, the metal door clanging shut with a finality that might have broken a lesser soul. But Zaria Kingston was no ordinary soul. She was a storm waiting to break. The cell was a grim box of peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights, its air thick with despair. Zaria sat on the cold bench, her mind racing. She knew the cameras in LuminaryLabs' lobby had recorded everything: Vance's assault, Brock's theft, Lyle's complicity. She knew her assistant, Priya, would already be alerting the board. And she knew these officers, with their history of bribes and brutality, had just handed her the keys to their downfall. Her fingers traced the edge of her cufflinks, a gift from her late mentor, etched with the words, "Justice is code." She closed her eyes, centering herself, her resolve a blade honed by years of battling prejudice. Then a commotion stirred outside. A woman's voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through the station's din. "What the hell is going on here?" Chief Nora Hensley, a no-nonsense veteran with steel-gray hair and a reputation for fairness, stormed into the booking area. Her eyes landed on Zaria, and recognition flashed across her face like lightning. She'd met Zaria at a tech conference months ago, where Zaria's keynote on AI ethics had left the room spellbound. "Zaria Kingston?" Nora's voice trembled with disbelief. "Why is she in cuffs?" Vance, lounging nearby, paled, his smirk evaporating. "Chief, she's a suspect. Caught with suspicious cash, he stammered, but Nora's glare silenced him. Open that cell, now, Nora snapped, her tone brooking no argument. Lyle fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he unlocked the door. Zara stepped out, her posture regal despite the cuffs and disheveled hair. Chief Hensley, she said, her voice calm but laced with steel. I'd like my belongings returned and an explanation for this outrage. Nora's eyes flicked to Vance, Brock, and Lyle, her expression darkening. You idiots, she hissed. Do you have any idea who you've just arrested? Vance's face drained of color, his bravado crumbling as the weight of his mistake settled in. Zaria adjusted her blazer, her gaze locking onto Vance's. Return my property, she said, each word a quiet promise of retribution. Brock scrambled to gather her tote, the cash, and documents now a damning testament to their recklessness. Nora handed Zaria her ID, her voice low with apology. Ms. Kingston, I'll personally escort you back to LuminaryLabs. This will be investigated. Zaria nodded, her eyes never leaving Vance's. She was free, but this was far from over. These men had thought her powerless, a victim to be caged. They were about to learn that Zaria Kingston was no prey. She was the predator, and her justice was coming. The glass doors of LuminaryLabs swung open with a whisper, admitting Zaria Kingston into her domain, like a queen returning to her court. The marks of her ordeal lingered, faint redness on her wrist from the handcuffs, a stray strand of her sleek black hair escaping its low bun. But her tailored emerald suit and measured stride radiated unyielding authority. At 29, Zaria was a titan, her Yale law intellect and billionaire status forged into a weapon of precision. The lobby, still buzzing from the morning's chaos, fell silent as she crossed it, her heels a metronome of impending reckoning. Employees parted before her, their eyes alight with awe and anticipation. Zaria was no longer just their CEO. She was a force about to rewrite the rules of justice. In the executive boardroom, a cavern of glass and steel on the 40th floor, Sergeant Vance Whitaker, officers Brock Callahan and Lyle Dutton waited, summoned under the guise of a security briefing. Vance lounged at the head of the table, his boots propped on the polished mahogany, oblivious to the storm brewing. Brock and Lyle, fidgeting with their badges, swapped crude jokes, their laughter grating against the room's sleek modernity. They hadn't seen Zaria since dragging her to the station hours ago, and they didn't expect to. To them, she was a nobody, a Jane Doe they'd humiliated and caged. The boardroom's massive screen flickered to life, and the officers barely glanced up, assuming it was another corporate PowerPoint. Zaria entered, her presence a thunderclap in the silence. The officers froze, their smirks evaporating as she strode to the head of the table, Vance's stolen seat. Gentlemen, she said, her voice a velvet blade, you're in my chair. Vance's boots hit the floor with a thud, his face reddening as he scrambled to his feet. You? He sputtered, recognition dawning too late. Zaria sat, her posture regal, her dark eyes pinning each man like specimens under a microscope. Zaria Kingston, CEO of LuminaryLabs, she said, her words slicing through their bravado, and you've made a catastrophic mistake. The boardroom doors opened again, admitting Priya, Zaria's assistant, who carried a tablet and a stack of files. Behind her stood two board members, their faces grim, and a tech specialist who activated the screen. Let's review your morning, Zaria said, her tone deceptively calm. The screen lit up with crystal-clear footage from LuminaryLabs lobby cameras, showing Vance's assault, his hand slamming Zaria against the glass, Brock's tape across her mouth, Lyle's theft of her cash. The officers' voices, dripping with racial slurs, echoed through the room. Filthy thief. People like you don't belong here. Board members gasped, their outrage palpable, but Zaria's expression remained serene, a predator toying with prey. Vance's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. That's edited, he bluffed, but his voice cracked, betraying his panic. Brock and Lyle shifted in their seats, their eyes darting toward the exit. Zaria leaned forward, her bun gleaming under the lights, a crown of defiance. Edited? She said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Then let's see the unedited version. She nodded to Priya, who swiped the tablet, pulling up additional footage from a secondary camera angle, capturing every damning detail. The room watched in stunned silence as Vance's brutality played out again, undeniable and unforgivable. But Zaria wasn't done. "You thought you could walk into my company, assault my people, and hide behind your badges," she said, her voice rising with controlled fury. "You were wrong." She opened a file revealing a report from her private investigator, hired weeks ago when the mysterious intrusions began. "For months I've had you watch, Sergeant Whitaker. Your bank accounts show deposits from rival firms, bribes to ignore the very intruders you were hired to stop." She slid a document across the table, detailing transactions linked to Vance's offshore accounts. "You sold out my company's security for pocket change." Brock's face drained of color, and Lyle's hands trembled as he tried to interrupt. "This is a setup," he stammered, but Zaria's glare silenced him. "A setup," she said, her voice a low growl. "You called me a thief, but you've been stealing from this community for years, extorting businesses, framing innocents, hiding behind unsubstantiated complaints." She pulled up another file, a dossier of their misconduct. 37 complaints against Vance, 19 against Brock, 12 against Lyle, all buried by corrupt connections. "Your reign ends today." The board members nodded, their resolve hardening. Zaria stood, her silhouette framed against the Silicon Valley skyline, her presence filling the room. "You thought I was powerless," she said, her eyes locking onto Vance's. "But I've spent my life dismantling men like you, bullies who think a badge makes them invincible." She gestured to the screen, now showing LuminaryLabs' logo. "This is my empire, and you've just trespassed on it." Vance slumped in his chair, his defiance crumbling under the weight of her evidence. Brock and Lyle looked like cornered animals, their bravado replaced by dread. Zaria's voice softened, but its edge remained. "You'll face justice, not just for me, but for every person you've wronged." She turned to Priya. "Call Chief Hensley. Tell her to bring a federal investigator." The room held its breath as Zaria sat back in her chair, the CEO's chair, her throne of truth. The officers had thought they'd caged her, but they were about to learn. Zaria Kingston was no prisoner. She was the architect of their downfall, and her justice was only beginning. The boardroom of LuminaryLabs was a crucible of justice, its glass walls reflecting the Silicon Valley skyline like a mirror of truth. Zaria Kingston stood at the head of the mahogany table, her emerald suit pristine, her long black hair swept into a low bun that gleamed with quiet defiance. At 29, she was a titan, CEO, Yale Law prodigy, and now the architect of a reckoning that would dismantle the men who dared to cage her. The air crackled with tension as Sergeant Vance Whitaker, officers Brock Callahan and Lyle Dutton sat before her, their uniforms rumpled, their faces pale with dread. The massive screen behind Zaria replayed their crimes in vivid detail. Vance's assault, Brock's theft, Lyle's complicity, all captured by LuminaryLabs' unblinking cameras. This wasn't a meeting, it was a tribunal, and Zaria was its judge. Roland Fairchild, a retired federal judge with a mane of silver hair and a reputation for ruthlessness, sat to Zaria's right, his presence lending gravitas to the proceedings. Zaria had called him in as her legal counsel, a move that turned the boardroom into a courtroom. "Gentlemen," Zaria began, her voice a blade cloaked in velvet, "you stand accused of assault, theft, and conspiracy to undermine this company's security. Let's begin with the evidence." She gestured to Priya, her assistant, who activated the screen, replaying the lobby footage. Vance's voice boomed through the speakers. "Filthy thief! People like you don't belong here." Board members flinched, their outrage palpable, but Zaria's expression remained serene, a storm held in check. Vance shifted in his seat, his bravado crumbling. "This is a setup," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "You can't prove intent." Zaria's smile was a razor's edge. "Intent?" she said, sliding a folder across the table. "This is a financial trail showing $50,000 in payments from Nextech, our rival, to your offshore account, Sergeant Whitaker. You were paid to ignore the intruders plaguing this company." She turned to Brock and Lyle. "And you too," Your accounts show smaller but equally damning deposits. You sold out LuminaryLabs for pocket change. Lyle's hands trembled and Brock's jaw dropped, his earlier swagger replaced by panic. Roland leaned forward, his voice gravelly with authority. Under California Penal Code Section 242, assault is a felony when committed with the intent to cause harm. Your actions, captured on video, meet that threshold. He tapped the folder. Section 503, embezzlement of funds entrusted to you as security personnel, carries a penalty of up to 7 years. And let's not forget federal charges for civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. 242. Vance's face turned ashen, his hands gripping the table to keep from collapsing. Zaria's Yale law training shone through, her questions surgical. "Did you check my ID before assaulting me?" she asked Vance. He stammered, I thought—" She cut him off. "You thought I was powerless. You were wrong." The boardroom doors opened, and Chief Nora Hensley entered, flanked by 2 federal agents in dark suits. Their presence sent a chill through the room, their badges glinting like a promise of accountability. "Ms. Kingston," Nora said, her voice tight with apology, "we've reviewed the footage and your investigator's report. These officers are under arrest." Vance lunged to his feet, his voice desperate. "You can't do this. I've got friends in the DA's office." Zaria's laugh was cold, cutting through his bluster. "Your friends can't save you from federal charges, Sergeant. Not when the evidence is this clear." The agents cuffed Vance, Brock, and Lyle, their faces a gallery of defeat. Vance's rage, Brock's disbelief, Lyle's silent terror. Zaria addressed them one last time. "You thought you could hide behind your badges, but you forgot. I built this company to expose lies. Your careers are over." The cuffs clicked shut, echoing like a gavel. The board members, silent until now, erupted in murmurs of approval, their faith in Zaria unshaken. She turned to them, her voice steady. "LuminaryLabs will no longer rely on external security. I've greenlit an AI-driven system to protect us, technology that doesn't discriminate." As the officers were led away, Zaria opened a new file on her tablet, detailing their history of misconduct. 37 complaints against Vance, 19 against Brock, 12 against Lyle, all dismissed by a corrupt system. "Every case you've touched in the last 10 years will be reopened," she said, her words a promise to the ghosts of their victims. The room felt lighter, as if a poison had been purged. Zaria's gaze swept the board, her bun catching the light like a crown. "We're not just a company," she said. "We're a beacon of truth. And today, we've proven it." The boardroom emptied, but Zaria lingered, her fingers tracing the edge of her desk, where her mantra was carved. Truth is the ultimate code. Vance had thought he could break her, but he'd only sharpened her resolve. The federal agents would charge him with assault, embezzlement, and civil rights violations, 15 years minimum. Brock and Lyle faced 7 years each for complicity and perjury. LuminaryLabs would emerge stronger, its security now a fortress of code, not corruption. Zaria stood at the window, the Silicon Valley skyline sprawling before her, a testament to her power. The battle was won, but her war for justice was far from over. The Silicon Valley sun dipped low, painting the glass tower of LuminaryLabs in hues of golden fire. Zaria Kingston stood in her 40th floor office, her emerald suit as sharp as her resolve, her long black hair swept into a low bun that gleamed like a crown forged from resilience. At 29, she was no longer just a CEO. She was a symbol, a beacon of justice who had turned a brutal assault into a catalyst for change. The boardroom battle was over, but its echoes reverberated far beyond the glass walls of her empire. The men who'd dared to cage her, Sergeant Vance Whitaker, officers Brock Callahan and Lyle Dutton, were now prisoners of their own crimes, their badges stripped, their futures sealed behind bars. Zaria's victory was not just personal, it was a clarion call for a world that had too long ignored the powerless. In the weeks following the confrontation, LuminaryLabs became a crucible of transformation. Zaria stood before her employees in the company's atrium, a sea of faces reflecting every shade of humanity. Engineers, coders, dreamers who'd built her vision from lines of code. Today, she said, her voice resonating with quiet power, we didn't just protect our company. We protected the dignity of every person who walks through these doors. No one, no one has the right to make us feel small. The applause was deafening, a thunderous affirmation that rippled through Silicon Valley. Zaria's gaze swept the crowd, her dark eyes alight with purpose. She was their leader, their warrior, their proof that justice could triumph over corruption. The legal fallout was swift and merciless. Vance Whitaker, once untouchable, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for assault, embezzlement, and civil rights violations. Brock Callahan and Lyle Dutton each faced 7 years for complicity and perjury, their smug laughter silenced by the weight of their convictions. Federal investigators, spurred by Zaria's evidence, reopened every case the trio had touched over the past decade. 127 arrests, 83 involving people of color, many tainted by fabricated evidence or excessive force. 32 wrongfully convicted individuals were released, their families weeping as they stepped into freedom. The San Jose Police Department, stung by the scandal, paid out $5.2 million in settlements from its own budget, a bitter reminder that justice had a price. Zaria didn't stop at punishment. She poured her resources into healing the wounds left by men like Vance. LuminaryLabs launched the Kingston Scholars Program, a $10 million initiative funding law and tech education for Black and minority students. Malik Jordan, the programmer harassed by Vance, became its first ambassador, mentoring young coders with a fire lit by his own ordeal. Ms. Kingston showed me what it means to fight, he told a packed lecture hall at Stanford, his voice steady with pride. Zaria herself became a national icon, gracing the cover of Forbes with the headline, "The CEO Who Rewrote Justice." The article detailed her journey, from Yale Law to Silicon Valley, from victim to victor. Her story inspiring millions who'd faced similar injustices. LuminaryLabs itself transformed. Zaria replaced external security with an AI-driven system, its algorithms blind to race, its efficiency unmatched. She mandated diversity training, personally designing modules on unconscious bias that became a model for tech giants nationwide. The company's headquarters, renamed Kingston Tower, stood as a monument to her legacy, its lobby adorned with a bronze plaque inscribed, "Justice knows no color." Employees walked taller, their trust in Zaria unshakable. She'd turned a moment of humiliation into a movement, proving that power wasn't just wealth or status, it was the courage to stand unbowed. Beyond the company, Zaria's impact reshaped Silicon Valley. Community oversight boards sprang up, giving residents a voice against police misconduct. The San Jose Police Department, under federal scrutiny, overhauled its training, emphasizing constitutional rights over brute force. Zaria testified before Congress, her voice unwavering as she recounted her assault, urging lawmakers to end qualified immunity for officers like Vance. Her words sparked a national conversation, trending online with hashtags like "Shiraj Justice for Zaria" and "Truth is Code." A young intern at LuminaryLabs, inspired by Zaria's courage, applied to law school, vowing to fight for civil rights. "She showed me what's possible," the intern said, clutching a photo of Zaria speaking at a gala. As dusk settled over Kingston Tower, Zaria stood at her office window, the valley's lights twinkling like stars below. Her fingers brushed the desk's carved mantra, "Truth is the ultimate code." She'd faced down bullies who'd seen her as less powerful, less worthy, less human, and she dismantled their world with precision and grace. The cash from her tote, once a pretext for her arrest, had funded a community center for underrepresented youth, its walls painted with her words, "No one can make you small unless you let them." Zaria's reflection in the glass was fierce, unbroken, a woman who'd turned pain into power. She turned from the window, her bun catching the last rays of sunlight, and sat at her desk. The fight wasn't over. There were more Vances out there, more systems to fix. But Zaria Kingston was ready. She'd built an empire, faced down injustice, and left a legacy that would outlast her. Silicon Valley, and the world beyond, would never forget the woman who'd taken back her throne and made justice her crown. Zaria Kingston's journey, from a brutal injustice to a triumphant stand for truth, ignites a spark of hope in us all. Her story is a powerful reminder that courage and resilience can dismantle even the most entrenched systems of oppression. It inspires us to stand tall, to speak out, and to demand justice, no matter the odds. We rate this tale an 8/10 for its gripping narrative, vivid characters, and transformative message that resonates across communities. What did Zaria's fight mean to you? Share your thoughts below and let us know where you're watching from, New York, Lagos, or anywhere in between. Your voice matters. Thank you for joining us on this journey of empowerment. Hit subscribe, share this story, and we'll see you next time for more tales of courage that change the world.